Legislative hearing, we will consider 6 bills. S 1397, the Tribal Health Data Improvement Act of 2021. S 3168, a bill to amend the White Mountain Apache Tribe Water Rights Quantification Act of 2010 to modify the enforceability date for certain provisions and for other purposes. S 3308, the Colorado River Indian Tribes Water Resiliency Act of 2021, S 3443, MOA Band of Choctaw Indians Recognition Act, and S 3773, a bill to authorize leases of up to 99 years for land held in trust for the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, and S 3789, a bill to amend the Native American Tourism and Improving Visitor Experience Act to authorize grants to Indian tribes, tribal organizations, and Native Hawaiian organizations, and for other purposes. Senator Smith's bill, S 1397, would expand tribal access to public health care, data and public health surveillance programs. It would also reauthorize through FY 2025 the National Center for Health Statistics, which is part of the CDC, and require the CDC to take certain actions to address the collection and the availability of health data for American Indians and Alaska Natives. Senator Kelly has 2 bills on today's agenda. S 3168 would extend the timeline for the White Mountain Apache Tribe's 2010 water settlement with the federal government and increased appropriations. And S 3308 would authorize the Colorado River Indian Tribes to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Arizona to make portions of their water allocation available for leasing by off-reservation users. Senator Shelby's bill, S 3443, would extend federal recognition to the MOA Band of Choctaw Indians of Alabama. And Senator Cantwell's bill, S 3773, would make a technical amendment to the Long-Term Leasing Act to permit the Chehalis Tribe of Washington enter into 99-year leases of restricted Indian lands located outside the boundaries of their reservations. The final bill on the agenda is 3789. I introduced this bill to amend the Native Act to clarify that BIA and the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations have the authority to issue grants established pursuant to the Act and to authorize appropriations for those purposes. Before I turn to Vice Chair Murkowski, I'd like to extend my welcome and appreciation to our witnesses for joining us today, and I look forward to your testimony in our discussion. Vice Chair Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking forward to today's hearing, but before I begin my comments, I want to acknowledge the loss that we have seen in Alaska. Just last Friday, we lost the Congressman for all Alaska, a congressman who'd been serving for 49 years in the 49th state. He had a passion for the people of Alaska, but most notably the Alaska Native peoples. He was proud to be the chairman of the subcommittee on Indigenous Peoples of the United States, and his legacy in focusing on matters that were important and timely for Native peoples around our country is something that we will continue to pay tribute and recognize his contributions, but I wanted to introduce that at the top of the committee here. So today we are considering 6 bills, as you have noted. 3 of these bills deal with tribal land use and water rights. One would extend full recognition to state-recognized tribe in Alabama. Another would clarify authorities to issue grants under the Native Act. All of these measures, of course, are important, but in the interest of time today, I'll limit my comments to the bill that I am co-leading with Senator Smith, and this is the Tribal Health Data Improvement Act of 2021, S 1397. What we intend to do with this legislation is to amend the Public Health Service Act to ensure that Indian tribes, tribal organizations, and tribal epidemiology centers have parity access to public health data and surveillance programs guaranteed them as tribal public health authorities under federal existing law. During the height of the pandemic, the 12 tribal epidemiology centers in the country, which includes Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, faced some very real challenges in accessing health information about American Indians and Alaska Natives, and in some cases, TECs were outright denied access to life-saving data that the CDC routinely made available to other public health authorities, including state health departments. Access to epidemiological data is vital for TECs to provide accurate and timely public health information, including recommendations to the Native communities they serve. Just a couple weeks ago, the GAO issued a report confirming this public health data access problem. They made 5 recommendations, including that HHS clarify the data it will make available to TECs as required by existing federal law, and that the CDC and IHS develop guidance on how TECs should request data and develop agency procedures on responding to these requests. Our bill would, in effect, implement these GAO recommendations. So looking forward to hearing the testimony from HHS on this bill. Would hope that my colleagues on the committee will be there to support this measure as we work it through. I think we recognize that we'd like to get this done so that there are no needless delays in accessing important health data. So again, I too join you in thanking all of the witnesses in being here before the committee today, and look forward to their testimony and the questioning from colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Murkowski. We'll turn to our witnesses now. We have the Honorable Brian Newland, Assistant Secretary, Indian Affairs at the Department of the Interior, Mr. Marvin Figueroa, Director of the Intergovernmental External Affairs, Department of Health and Human Services. And I'd like to call on Senator Kelly to introduce his guests and witnesses remotely.
He's online but muted.
Apparently you are online but muted. We'll move on to the.
Wait, we heard something.
Did I just hear Senator Kelly or just my own echo? We're going to move on to Senator Cantwell's guest, which is who is the Honorable Harry Pickernell, Sr. Chairman Pickernell has served as chairman of the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation for the past 5 years. He's also served as vice chairman of the tribe and previously worked in the tribe's Natural Resource Department. In all of these roles, Chairman Pickernell has worked to expand economic opportunities for the Chehalis tribes and its citizens. Senator Kelly, if you are not available, then I'll go ahead and provide the introductions for you. All right. In the interest of time, we do have a vote ongoing, so we're going to move this along. We have the Honorable Gwendina Lee Gatewood, a chairwoman of the White Apache Tribe, White River, Arizona, and the Honorable Amelia Flores, chairwoman of the Colorado River Indian Tribes, Parker, Arizona. Is Senator Shelby here to introduce? Okay, we're going to wait on Senator Shelby. I know it is important for him to introduce his guest. calling an audible. We're going to, we'll start with the testimony, and when Senators Smith and Shelby arrive, they can introduce their witnesses. So we'll start with Mr. Newland. You know the drill. Please confine your remarks to 5 minutes. We appreciate precision and brevity. Secretary Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Ani, good afternoon. My name is Brian Newland, and I have the privilege of serving as Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs here at the Department of the Interior, and it's an honor to be back in front of the committee today. Before I begin, as Vice Chair Murkowski noted, I also want to acknowledge the passing of the Dean of the House, Congressman Don Young. My condolences go out to his family, his friends, and his staff and colleagues here. He was a loving husband, both to his wife Lou and later to Anne. He was a father, a veteran, a teacher at a BIA school, which he loved telling me that story, and spent much of his life in rural Alaska. He was very proud of that. I know he was also a friend to many people here and in Congress, as he was a friend to Secretary Holland, and that his passing is a personal loss for many folks here. And I'm very sorry for those who are grieving his loss today. Mr. Chairman, you've invited me here to share the department's views on several pieces of legislation. S 3773 would authorize leases of up to 99 years for land held in trust for the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation. The Long-Term Leasing Act generally authorizes tribes to lease their lands for up to 25 years with a renewal period of 25 years, subject to the Secretary's approval. If a tribe wishes to enter into a lease of their own lands for a longer period, it must come to Congress and get approval for that in the form of an amendment to the Long-Term Leasing Act. The Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation are seeking the ability to lease their lands for up to 99 years to strengthen their sovereignty over their own lands and to promote economic development. The department supports this bill. S 3168 would amend the White Mountain Apache Tribe Water Rights Quantification Act of 2010 in two ways. First, it would extend the enforceability date of the settlement by 2 years until April 30th, 2025. And second, it would authorize an additional $250 million for design and construction of the tribe's rural water system. Additional funds are needed to complete the construction of infrastructure included in the Tribe Settlement Act, and the need for those funds has arisen due to unexpected problems in the original design of the drinking water infrastructure. The department supports the intent of this bill and has been working with the tribe to develop a more reliable assessment of the level of funding needed to fulfill the terms of the Settlement Act. I look forward to continuing our work with the tribe, the sponsors of the bill, and the committee on this legislation so that we can authorize the amount of funds needed to fulfill the settlement. S 3308 would authorize the Colorado River Indian tribes to enter into agreements to lease, exchange, or store a portion of its decreed water rights in Arizona. The bill is carefully balanced among interests in the lower Colorado River Basin and contains important safeguards to promote the conservation of water. For example, the bill requires several agreements between the tribe, the state, and the United States before any lease, exchange, or storage agreement. The legislation would only authorize the tribes to lease, exchange, or store that portion of their water right that is consumptively used in Arizona in 4 of the 5 preceding years. Agreements could only be for use in the lower basin portion of Arizona and cannot exceed a term of 100 years. The department supports this legislation and supports the right of all tribes to achieve economic value from their water rights. S 3443 would provide federal recognition for the Moa Band of Choctaw Indians, designate a service area, and require the Secretary of the Interior to take up to 3,200 acres of land into trust for the band. The Moa Band had previously petitioned the department for federal recognition under our regulations at 25 CFR Part 83. The department denied the Moa Band's petition in 1997, and we respect Congress's authority to recognize tribes under its Article 1 powers. This proposed legislation does not include any findings or information identifying facts or circumstances that would aid us in understanding the merits of the proposal. Therefore, we do not express support or opposition to the legislation at this time. And lastly, S 3789 would amend the Native Act by creating a new section to allow the Director of the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations to make grants directly to Native Hawaiian organizations. Presently, the department makes grants to Native Hawaiian organizations under the Native Act through a process that can be cumbersome. This legislation would simplify that process and ensure that Native Hawaiian organizations have an opportunity to access this important program, and we support this bill. Chairman Schatz, Vice Chair Murkowski, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's views today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We're going to have Senator Shelby introduce his guest and Senator Smith introduce hers, and then we will move on to Mr. Figueroa from HHS. Senator Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Chairman Schatz, Vice Chairman Murkowski, members of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee. It's been a number of years since I've appeared before your committee. Thank you for allowing me here today the opportunity to introduce Dr. LeBaron Byrd, who's seated right here, and express my strong support for providing federal recognition to the Mowa Band of Choctaw Indians in my state of Alabama. Dr. Byrd currently serves as the tribal chief of the Mowa Band of Choctaw Indians. He's a native of Mobile County. Dr. Byrd has been a tribal member of the Mowa Band for more than 40 years, serving in various roles on the tribe's council. He served in leadership positions in community organizations all across South Alabama. In particular, Dr. Byrd has worked to help provide greater educational opportunities for Native American students in both Mobile and Washington counties as a teacher and administrator for 34 years. During this hearing later, Dr. Byrd will testify about the Mowa Band's distinct history as an indigenous community, which warrants the need to grant the tribe federal recognition. The Mowa Band is comprised of Choctaw descendants that remained in Alabama following the removal of the main Choctaw Nation to Oklahoma. The Mowa Band occupied lands that were part of the original territory of the Choctaw Nation in South Alabama. Today, the Mowa Band continues to occupy the same territory where the tribe provides essential government and community services to its citizens. The Mowa Band has been recognized as a tribal community by various government agencies and entities for several decades, including the state of Alabama in 1979. Yet to date, the Mowa Band still lacks federal recognition as a tribe under the U.S. law. Notably, this committee previously approved legislation, Mr. Chairman, extending federal recognition to the Mowa Band. It's my hope that this committee will do so once again. Federal recognition would allow for the Mowa Band to continue to maintain its tribal community and to support its citizens. I want to thank you on their behalf, Mr. Chairman, for letting us all be here today and for you holding this hearing, and I hope that you in the committee will act on this expeditiously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Shelby, for being here. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair Schatz, and nice to see you, Senator Shelby. I want to start by thanking you, Chair Schatz, for holding this hearing today, and I look forward to hearing testimony on my Tribal Health Data Improvement Act, which I have introduced with Vice Chair Murkowski. And I am very excited to welcome Dr. Darren Prescott, who is Director of Health and Clinic CEO for the Lower Sioux Indian Community and a board member of the Great Lakes Area Tribal Health Board, to share testimony about this bill with the committee. I had the opportunity to visit Lower Sioux last summer and to see the great work that you're doing there, so it's wonderful to welcome you here to our committee hearing virtually. Dr. Prescott is an enrolled member of Lower Sioux and has a background as a nurse, manager, educator, and healthcare administrator. And in all those roles, he has seen and knows firsthand how important data sharing is for tribes that are fighting the pandemic and addressing other public health issues. So Wopida Danka, Dr. Prescott, for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing your testimony.
Thank you very much, Senator Smith. Mr. Figueroa, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Schatz, Vice Chair Murkowski, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 1397, the Tribal Health Data Improvement Act. My name is Marvin Figueroa. I'm the Director of the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs, or IEA, at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The department is dedicated to enhancing the health and well-being of every person and every community in this country, and is committed to affirming the relationship between our department and tribal nations by advancing connections, providing expertise, increasing resources, and partnering to improve the health and safety of all American Indian and Alaska Natives. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted long-standing disparities in health outcomes in tribal communities. The pandemic has also shown a spotlight on the challenges inherent in collecting, reporting, and sharing health data among state, local, territorial, and tribal governments. The department appreciates the opportunity to discuss these issues and highlight HHS efforts to not only enhance tribal access to data, but also improve access to care and health outcomes. IEA facilitates communication and collaboration between HHS and state, local, and tribal governments. In particular, we coordinate the department's strategies to strengthen our nation-to-nation relationship with tribal nations and improve the multi-level coordination of health and human services programs. Within our broad tribal outreach strategy, IEA manages the Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee, which was established in 2010 to seek consensus, exchange views, share information, provide advice and recommendation, and facilitate any other interaction related to intergovernmental responsibilities or administration of HHS programs and initiatives. This outreach is accomplished through forums, meetings, site visits, and conversations between federal officials and elected tribal leaders. While the STAC is critical to advising the department on its interactions with tribal nations, the department recognizes that the STAC is no substitute for tribal consultation, which the department is committed to holding on a regular and meaningful basis. Engaging with tribal leadership and community has been a priority for Secretary Becerra and department leaders, with the goal of building a network of tribal relations and diplomacy for decades to come. Recognizing our unique nation-to-nation relationship, HHS values the work to advance tribal sovereignty and self-determination for federally recognized tribes. Ensuring access to quality health and public health data is a threshold issue for this vision. HHS recognizes the challenges in data collection, sharing, and dissemination, especially where tribal health data is concerned. The existing framework of legal and policy issues around data collection authorities, privacy and confidentiality, data ownership, and the necessary data use agreements additionally complicate this data ecosystem. Accessible, timely, and quality data is essential for making decisions about how to protect and improve the health of tribal communities in rural and urban areas. The department appreciates the challenges in this space and is working with tribal partners to address them. For example, my colleagues at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention are providing support both through funding and technical assistance to improve access to public health data and modernize data systems and public health capabilities across the country, including more specifically in our tribal partners. My written testimony includes other examples of ongoing efforts. The Tribal Health Data Improvement Act aims to ensure tribal nations are equipped with public health data to better operate public health programs and improve health outcomes within their communities. It works to clarify the federal role in collection and availability of health data with respect to Indian tribes. Moreover, this legislation identifies ways to improve the collection and calculation of health statistics with respect to Indian tribes, such as requiring the Secretary to release all applicable public health data on tribal epidemiology centers within 180 days of enactment, and requiring the CDC to expand and improve their assistance to states with respect to sharing data with tribal entities. HHS supports this objective of the legislation, and we are grateful that Senator Smith and bipartisan members of this committee have worked to address these important issues. The health burden carried by American Indians and Alaska Natives communities is unacceptable. While we have made strides towards improving data collection and sharing during COVID-19, there is much more work to do. With these issues in mind, HHS remains available to provide technical assistance so that we can advance constructive solutions in line with the objectives and goals of this committee and this administration. I look forward to any questions. Thank you again for the opportunity to be in your presence this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Figueroa. Let's turn next to Chairwoman Lee Gatewood. Welcome.
Dagote, Tsilikaisan Inde Paniya, Chairman Schatz, Vice Chairwoman Murkowski, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 3168, a bill to amend the White Mountain Apache Tribe Water Rights Quantification Act of 2010. I also want to thank Senator Kelly for championing this critical legislation, Senator Sinema for co-sponsoring it for the White Mountain Apache Tribe. My name is Gwendina Lee Gatewood. I am the tribal chairwoman of the White Mountain Apache Tribe, located in the beautiful White Mountains of Arizona. The headwaters and tributaries of the Salt River arise on our reservation and are principal water sources for our people and the greater Phoenix metropolitan area. The tribe's current water sources and infrastructure have been and continue to be grossly inadequate to meet the current demands and needs of our reservation communities. We are in urgent need of a long-term solution for our drinking water needs. And currently, the tribe is served by the Minor Flat well field. Well production has fallen sharply and is in irreversible decline. Over the last decade, well production has dropped by 60%. The tribe experiences drinking water shortages. The quality of the existing water sources threatens the health of our people, including the Indian Health Services Regional Hospital and State and Bureau of Indian Affairs schools. Here's a picture to my left of the groundwater from Carrizo with high concentrations of manganese. The only viable solution is the replacement of failing groundwater resources with surface water from the North Fork of the White River. Fortunately, in 2010, Congress enacted the White Mountain Apache Tribe Water Rights Quantification Act, which confirmed and authorized the tribe's water settlement with the federal government and Arizona state parties after decades of litigation. The cornerstone of the act is the authorization for the design and construction of the White Mountain Apache Tribe's rural water system, which will provide a long-term and reliable supply for current and future generations. Recognizing the importance of the act and rural water system, Congress has previously approved 2 amendments to the act to address cost overruns and the resulting delays in the required environmental review, which are described in more detail in my written testimony submitted to the committee. Since the passage of the amendments, we have learned that the cost for the rural water system will exceed the cost authorized in the underlying act, even when factoring in the additional flexibility to use previously authorized water-related economic development funds for the project. The associated engineering issues have also delayed the environmental review process, thus requiring the need to extend the enforceability date to 2 years. As work on the design and geotechnical study of the proposed dam site for the rural water system has taken place, the tribe, together with Reclamation and its consultants, have identified additional cost overruns beyond what was initially contemplated. In 2019, the tribe worked with Reclamation on a new drilling program to further define the site characteristics and prepare the viability assessment of the Minor Flat Dam, a key component of the rural water system. In the course of the work, the tribe's consulting engineers altered the design to address seepage and stability issues at the dam site, which resulted in an increased cost estimate for the project. In October 2021, the engineer of record finalized its viability assessment, finding the dam viable. We continue to work closely with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and believe we are close to reaching consensus on a number that would address the design issues so that the rural water system can be built and the settlement finalized. I cannot overstate the importance of our water rights settlement and the White Mountain Apache Tribe's rural water system and the health and welfare of our people. If this issue is not resolved, the completion of the rural water system project will be threatened, thereby increasing the ultimate cost to the tribe and to the United States, and delaying delivery of life-sustaining drinking water to our reservation communities. Consequently, the tribe is seeking a final amendment to increase the federal funds authorized to complete the rural water system project to address cost overruns and extend the enforceability date to April 30, 2025, to allow sufficient time for the environmental review associated with the project to be completed. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Before we turn to Chairwoman Flores, I understand that Senator Kelly is on the line and would like to make introductions of both of you. And I would just like to acknowledge, I've just been informed that both Chairwoman Lee Gatewood and Chairwoman Flores are the first women to be the heads of your tribe. So congratulations.
Yes.
It's wonderful to have you as part of our committee and the leadership that you present. Senator Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And sorry I'm a little late here, but thank you for the opportunity to testify on 2 bills that I introduced on behalf of the Colorado River Indian Tribes and the White Mountain Apache tribes in Arizona. In a moment, I'll get to the two bills, but first I want to introduce the two tribal leaders joining us today. Obviously, you already heard from Chairwoman Lee Gatewood, and I'll introduce her as well, but after her testimony here. But Chairwoman Amelia Flores is testifying on behalf of the Colorado River Indian tribes. And as you've already heard from Chairwoman Lee Gatewood, she's testifying on behalf of the White Mountain Apache tribe. To both chairwomen, thank you for your leadership and support of these bills. The West is dealing with the real-time effects of the worst drought in 1,200 years. Let me say that again, 1,200 years. Below average snowpack in the upper basin of the Colorado River is reducing water availability for farmers, for ranchers, for businesses, and for communities across 7 states in the West. The issue is a priority for me because Arizona is on the front lines of this mega drought. And in many instances, tribal nations are among the most vulnerable to its effects. At the same time, tribes hold significant water rights that can position them to lead on water conservation and drought management. For example, the Gila River Indian community recently led efforts to team up with water users in Arizona, in Nevada, and Southern California. And together they announced the first ever plan to conserve 1 million acre-feet of water in the lower Colorado River Basin over the next 2 years. That water will stay in Lake Mead. That plan demonstrates the role that tribes can play in promoting a secure water future for the West. The Colorado River Indian tribes are located along the banks of the Colorado River, where they have farmed this land for thousands of years. Agriculture is a key part of their economy and their culture. In 2005, the Supreme Court quantified their right to nearly 1/4 of all Colorado River water allocated in Arizona. Today, they farm across 125 square miles of tribal land using an irrigation project that was built mostly by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and it also just happens to be one of the oldest systems like this in the nation. Now, I've visited their farmland, and I've seen the BIA infrastructure that was built a long time ago, and significant amounts of water are being wasted by a failing flood irrigation project. In some places, and it's not just one place. You can see water leaking through hand-dug dirt canals, and we're just losing the water. Chairwoman Flores wants to urgently modernize that system, but she needs the resources to line canals and install water-efficient infrastructure like drip irrigation. They have some pilot projects on this already that I've been out and visited that are successful. Now, my bill would enable her government to lease a portion of their water off reservation to non-tribal water users for things like habitat restoration, water storage, and for Arizona communities who need it as the drought gets worse. The revenue then from these transfers could then be reinvested into their farming operations for repairs and water efficiency upgrades. And then this will pay dividends. They can conserve more water, they can lease more water, they'll have the resources to become even more resilient and water efficient. And this capability would be a new tool in ongoing efforts to help manage drought in Arizona. This legislation was developed following a series of public meetings organized by the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and it's backed by local governments. It's backed by environmental organizations and many in Arizona's business community. Madam Chairwoman, my written testimony will include several letters from Arizonans who support this bill. Now, my other bill would address the drinking water needs of the White Mountain Apache tribe, which is right now is completely reliant on a diminishing groundwater source. 12 years ago, Senator John Kyle led an effort to secure the water rights of the White Mountain Apache tribe. And in exchange for waiving their claims to the Salt River, the tribe agreed to accept the federal government's offer to build a dam and a reservoir to store their surface water. Unfortunately, engineering complications have led to cost overruns and delays in constructing this dam. Now, my legislation would extend the deadline for completing the dam and increase its authorized funding level. The United States government has an obligation to honor the commitment that it made to the White Mountain Apache tribe, and my bill would do just that. So, Madam Chairwoman, this concludes my testimony, and thank you for the opportunity to let me speak at today's hearing.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. And with that introduction, let's go to Chairman Flores. Welcome to the committee.
Kuchkamadu, Nyepi Mul, Amelia Flores, Makap Shadom, Iman Vench, Amat Kowel. Good afternoon and thank you, Vice Chair and honorable committee members. I am Amelia Flores, Chairwoman of the Colorado River Indian Tribes. I am here today to ask for your support and to answer your questions about the legislation we propose, S3308, the Colorado River Indian Tribes Water Resiliency Act. And yep, Makapchadum, I am Mojave. The Mojave people have always lived along the Colorado River and farmed with its waters. And today I want to talk about the river that is our namesake. It is in trouble. Our watershed is hotter, drier, and windier. This means less rain and more evaporation. Multiple years with these conditions have created extremely low amounts of runoff for our river. In 2007, the water managers at Reclamation implemented a plan to cut water deliveries if the amount of water in Lake Mead dropped, the shortage guidelines. And in 2019, the shortage cuts were not projected to be enough to save Lake Mead, and we have the Drought Contingency Plan, the DCP. In December, we learned that even those additional cuts were not enough. We are now working to cut even more because forecasts show that the balances of water between Lake Mead and Lake Powell is at risk. CRIT is doing its part. We have been fallowing productive farmlands to leave water in Lake Mead since 2016. We have left more than 200,000 acre feet in the lake, raising it by 3 feet. But without our bill, this is the only way we can help. The river needs all the tools that can be made available to survive this continued trend of less and less water. This legislation, S3308, will provide additional tools. The CRIT water is the first and highest priority water on the river. The water used by the Arizona metro areas that is delivered by the CAP is the lowest priority and is getting cut. But unlike many other tribes in the state, we cannot make our water available for delivery to them until Congress allows it. Let me address some specifics about the legislation and the tools it can provide. First, authorizing us to lease water will not increase the use of water from the river. We can only lease as much water as we have stopped using on our reservation. The river will stay whole. Second, no new infrastructure is needed to deliver or treat this water. There will be no federal dollars needed to implement this bill. Third, it will expand our ability to help save the life of the river. Right now, we cannot make water available for off-reservation river habitat that is suffering as water levels drop. This bill will help us support the native plant and endangered fish restoration programs along other stretches of the river like we do on our reservation. Fourth, and the most important to our people, This legislation protects our sovereignty over our water. This river is our namesake. It is our life. And if we do not control our water, history tells us that others will. My tribe has worked with the Department of the Interior, the Arizona Department of Water Resources, water users, and environmental organizations over the past 6 years to develop and promote this legislation. It was vetted in Arizona through 2 public state-run hearings and a months-long comment period. We have overwhelming support. Let me close by saying this is a critical time in the Colorado River Basin. We are facing a mega drought, and Arizona is ground zero. This bill helps us save our river, and it helps us generate the revenue we need to adapt to the drier climate. It also allows us to help our neighbors. Senators Kelly, Sinema, my tribe, and many others in Arizona believe this bill will help save the Colorado River, and I ask for your support. Yamam, Etka, Korenyem. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now recognize the Honorable Harry Pickernell, Sr., the Chairman of the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, Oakville, Washington.
Good afternoon, Chairman Schatz, Vice Chair Makowski, and members of the committee. My name is Harry Pickernell, Chairman of the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation. I am pleased to testify today in support of S 3773. This bill would amend the Long-Term Leasing Act to add the Chehalis tribe to the list of 59 other Indian tribes that are able to enter into leases with third parties terms of up to 99 years. The Chehalis Reservation was created by executive order in 1864 and is located between the confluence of the Chehalis River and the Black River. Much of the tribe's 4,800-acre land base is in floodplain, and the tribe has very little land suitable for economic development. Southwest Washington State has long been an economically depressed area, lacking in businesses and jobs for tribal members and non-Indians alike. The Chehalis tribe operates a casino, but is always looking for ways to diversify its economic base to continue supporting its education, health, housing, safety, and other programs for its members. For example, in 2020, the Chehalis tribe opened Talking Cedar, a destination restaurant and brewery that is also the first ever legal distillery built in Indian country. This committee and the U.S. Senate assisted in making the Talking Cedar project a reality when in 2018, Congress repealed the 1834 law that prohibited constructing distilleries in Indian country. The repeal of that 19th century law allowed the Chehalis tribe to begin construction on the distillery, which was completed in 2020. Talking Cedar has been a tremendous success and is the largest craft distillery west of the Mississippi. Today, we ask the committee to again assist the tribe in its efforts to diversify its economy. The Long-Term Leasing Act limits the terms of surface leases of tribal trust land to an initial 25-year term with a 25-year extension, for a total of 50 years. Since the enactment of the Long-Term Leasing Act in 1955, Congress has amended the law and authorized the Secretary to approve leases of up to 99 years for 59 Indian tribes. S 3773 would simply add the Chehalis tribe to that list and authorize the tribe to execute leases with terms of up to 99 years. The tribe is currently making improvements on 2 parcels of tribal trust land that are located on major transportation routes on Interstate 5 and State Highway 12. Both parcels have adjacent access to a railroad and would be very suitable for warehouse operations. The tribe has received proposals for developing multiple warehouse facilities on these parcels to serve supply chain needs between the cities of Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and Portland. All these proposals, however, would require the tribe to be able to execute leases for up to 99 years. In 2008, the tribe was able to successfully develop the first Great Wolf Lodge water park on an Indian reservation under the current 50-year leasing term limit. The financing and economic landscape in 2022, however, makes working within that 50-year term no longer viable for larger scale construction projects. S 3773 addresses the Chehalis tribe's immediate need for these development opportunities by adding the tribe's name to the list of tribes in the Long-Term Leasing Act with 99-year lease authority. The tribe looks forward to working with the committee to move this bill forward. The tribe appreciates the committee scheduling this hearing and urges swift consideration and passage of S 3773. This concludes my testimony, and I would be happy to answer any questions when appropriate.
Thank you very much, and we'll now recognize the Honorable LeBaron Byrd, the Chief of the Moa Band of Choctaw Indians, Mount Vernon, Alabama. Welcome.
Chairman Schatz, Vice Chairman Mikowski, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity today to testify on behalf of my tribe. I also must thank Senator Shelby for his longstanding friendship and support of our people. Our quest for full federal recognition. Senator Shelby's introduction of S 3443, the Moa Band of Choctaw Indians Recognition Act, is his latest effort on our behalf to provide federal recognition to the Moa Band. For over 4 decades, the Moa Band has sought federal recognition to overturn both historic and modern injustices to our communities. Today, we're asking this committee to support Senator Shelby's effort to finally recognize the Moa Band. As a member of the federal families of Indian nations, we would honor that privilege. The Moa Band of Choctaw Indians are descendants of the Choctaw Nation that stayed in our homelands after Indian removal, despite the fact that very few received the Indian homesteads promised by the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. We kept our communities together and supported each other, becoming identifiable Indian enclaves, separated from surrounding white and black communities by our genetic origins, social and cultural ties, and political leadership. Our ancestors wisely acquired ownership of land centered around our homeland of today and built homes, churches, and schools on Indian-owned property. Churches and schools built on and supported by Methodist, Baptist, and Catholic missionaries became the central to both the identity and survival of the Moa Band, until federal court cases of the 1960s mandated integration, a three-way racially segregated education system, white, black, and other, existed in the Moa Choctaw community. I am a graduate of one of those other schools, and I've made it my life's work to ensure our young people have better opportunities in education. We live in the same distinct Indian enclave in southwest Alabama, an area approximately 20 miles north to south and 10 miles east to west. Here we provide government and community services to our citizens, including community policing, legal aid, housing, and medical services. We have begun restoring our community's cultural traditions and have a nationally known annual powwow. The tribe has been recognized by the state of Alabama since 1979 by federal agencies such as HUD, HHS, we're part of the National Congress of American Indians, and other federally recognized tribes, church organizations, and notable scholars. Sadly, the Department of the Interior is the only major federal agency that does not recognize us as an Indian tribe. Our petition, among the first submission, was introduced in 1978. By the time our petition moved through the queue, the Bureau of Indian Affairs recognition process was already being denounced as broken. Given the summary denial of our petition, I must agree with that criticism. In 1997, the Department of the Interior denied us a summary review process that focused exclusively on the scarcity of federally records listing Moa ancestors dating from 1830s removal period or earlier. Federal records or lists of names didn't include the Moa Band of Choctaw tribal members like many others. In fact, the color choices on the 1850 census were white, black, and mulatto. I want to make it clear the malfeasance of federal agents in the 19th century by not fulfilling their federal treaty responsibility provided the rationale for federal agents in the 20th century to deny the MOA federal recognitions. Changes made in 2014 to the offer regulation 25 CFR Part 83 would make the MOA Choctaw a strong petitioner for a full review. However, as there is no reconsideration for the 1997 denial, the only avenue open to the MOA is recognition by the United States Congress. Federal recognition by act of Congress is a long-standing and often used exercise of the plenary power of the Congress. It was most recently exercised to recognize tribes in Virginia and Montana during the 115th and 116th Congresses, including the tribe that had its petition denied by the Interior. We humbly ask that this committee support the exercise of that power to recognize the Moa Bandit Choctaw Indians. Thank you for your opportunity to testify today. On behalf of my tribe, I stand ready to answer any question the committee may have for me.
Thank you very much, Chief Byrd. And finally, we have Dr. Darren Prescott, the Director and Clinic CEO of the Lower Sioux Indian Community and Great Lakes Area Tribal Health Board in Morton, Minnesota.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hahana Washte. Good day, everybody. Chair Schatz, Vice Chair Murkowski, and members of the committee. I'm Darren Prescott, enrolled citizen of Lower Sioux Indian Community in Southwest Minnesota. Currently, I'm my community's health and clinic CEO and board member of the Great Lakes Area Tribal Health Board. I want to thank Senator Smith and Murkowski for introducing Senate Bill 1397. The bill recognizes tribal sovereignty as well as the need for data-driven decision-making among tribes. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that data sharing is imperative to make decisions and create policies that protect the lives of American Indian and Alaska Natives. Traditionally, tribes have been data-driven in their planning, more so in a qualitative way. Our survival depended on it historically as much as our continued survival does today. There are stories of estimating seasonal counts of bison, deer, and other game populations, and determining how many could be taken for survival while maintaining the population for future generations of the game. Corn that grew the strongest was kept for seed the following seasons. These stories and practices were passed down, tying qualitative to quantitative data. The importance of data is well known by tribes. The need for meaningful data is oftentimes challenging for tribes to obtain. Much of the data on tribal affiliation reported through the U.S. and state governments is done on a self-reporting basis of tribal affiliation. The data collection is typically done in response to a need for data on a tribal on a particular utilization. Our tribal services collect data and tribal enrollment and affiliation because we have to. In my previous work in the private sector, the impetus for a patient to identify as a tribal citizen relied solely on the patient. Even when there were hard stops implemented in electronic registration systems, oftentimes an assumption is made based on appearance or other presenting information, either classifying as Caucasian or multi-race, which only further adds to the erasure of Indigenous people. To further complicate data collection efforts, American Indian Alaska Native citizens may not identify their tribal affiliation due to fear of discrimination, delayed treatment, or lesser level of care. Senate Bill 1397 has an opportunity to further acknowledge protection, relevance, and obligation of meaningful data to tribal citizens from the U.S. government. It's imperative that data sharing agreements have more intentional collaboration with tribes on birth and death certificate accuracy. A 2017 article identified that the inaccuracy rate of American Indian Alaska Native death certificates was close to 50%. While there are multiple people processing and processes in place for death certificates, there is no specific check and balance for tribal affiliations. What I've experienced over the past 8 years in my journey from the private health sector to the tribal health sector is more of a parental approach that's taken by federal and state governments over tribes when it comes to data. I recall 2021, this was just before the COVID-19 vaccines were released. In a state tribal health director meeting, tribal health directors were very poignantly reminded that we needed to report all our data for administration to make sure we were indeed administering the vaccines. I oftentimes wonder if commercial pharmacies, health systems, and local public health were equally as scrutinized. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's taught us the need for data in real time. As Senator Murkowski mentioned, tribal epidemiology centers were denied access to CDC data on tribes, which could have expedited our public health response. I want to close with a positive example of what successful data sharing agreements can look like. The Minnesota Department of Health has recently established an Office of American Indian Health. One of the office's current objectives is to develop infectious disease data sharing agreements with all 11 Minnesota tribes. Lower Sioux Indian community is currently working on our agreement language. I know there are other examples of successful data sharing agreements within other states, so this can be done if it's approached in the right way with each individual tribe. I implore you to support this bill as a pathway to honor tribal sovereignty and build tribal, state, and federal relations. Padamiye, thank you.
Thank all of our testifiers. I'll start with Mr. Newland. Brief question, hopefully a brief answer. Congress has amended the Long-Term Leasing Act nearly 60 times on a tribe-by-tribe basis. We just heard from Chehalis about how the 25-year lease limitation is stifling business prospects. Are you able to address this without a statutory fix?
No.
Will you work with me on finding a statutory fix?
Yes.
Thank you. Chairman Pickernell, if Congress were to amend the Long-Term Leasing Act to authorize 99-year leases, would this support the economic sovereignty of your tribe, and how so, if so?
It would help us in securing loans for our economic development ventures, and give us that the ability to ensure our lenders that we can hold longer terms with the projects that we present.
Thank you very much. Mr. Newland, for the record, does the Department of Interior support the changes to the Native Act in S 3789?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chief Byrd, what hurdles have you faced in building a historical record to support your tribe's efforts to achieve federal acknowledgement?
Since most of our Choctaws and other Southeast Indians moved to Oklahoma, the greatest number of recorded names are those that moved. In our respect, those that remain, they were literate and they were able to push federal agents to get their names on federal rolls. And those that were not as literate, they would have to been included. Most of our ancestors were at the mercy of unscrupulous federal agents who often refused to enroll them. Therefore, the action or inaction of those federal agents resulted in most of our ancestors being excluded from the federal list or Indians that remain in Alabama. And so with that being said, we rely on scholars from universities. We have a Dr. Denise Bates from the University of Arizona. She's working exclusively with us now and getting recorded documentation for our tribe that we did not have access before. We're putting that on digital networks so that we'll have that information readily available. We receive additional information concerning census reports, military records, and everything that prove that there were Choctaws in the Mobile, Washington County areas during the pre and post Civil War era.
Thank you very much. Chairwoman Flores, I understand Arizona is in a mega drought, and that tribal conservation at Lake Mead is really essential. What would your conservation's plan be if you had water leasing authority, and how would you partner with other stakeholder tribes to mitigate the depletion of Lake Mead?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. How would we provide
partner with other stakeholder
partner with
tribes?
other state with the state of Arizona? We would partner with and those stakeholders within the state. We wouldn't go outside of the state of Arizona. And we have overwhelming support. We have had hearings with the state. We worked with the federal government. We worked with the state of Arizona. And going back to my first statement was that, you know, we held public hearing meetings, and we've got feedback from that. We've held open discussions of comments, a comment period, a month-long comment period. And so we have overwhelming support in working with the state of Arizona and water users.
Thank you. Final question, Chairwoman Lee Gatewood. I understand drought conditions are getting worse. They're getting worse everywhere, but I know it's particularly bad in the state of Arizona. If this bill passes, how quickly will you be able to get shovels into the ground on your water system?
Well, construction schedule for the rural
Microphone.
Construction schedule for our rural water system, according to our tribal engineer, assuming the record of decision is completed in April 2024 for the project, final design of the pipelines could be finished and construction started in late 2025, and the dam in 2026 and water treatment plant in 2028. Water could start to be delivered to our communities in 2028. So we're looking forward to that.
Thank you very much. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Newland, I would like to turn to you first. This will relate to previously denied recognition petitions. Is it Interior's position that in order to obtain federal recognition after a petition is denied, that the tribe has to come to Congress?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Yes, that's our position.
And given then that the administrative recognition process was overhauled effectively in 2015, why not just allow the tribes that were denied under the old process to try again for department recognition?
Thank you. I appreciate that question, Vice Chair Murkowski. You know, that was the position that the department maintained in the 2015 regulations. That groups that had been previously denied should not be permitted to repetition under revised regulations. The department was sued on those regulations, and we had a remand from federal courts in 2 cases to take another look at those regulations. We're in the process of doing that. I hope to have a clearer answer for you on what the regulations will say. I can't speak to it at that time.
Do you have any sense of timing on that?
I would say soon.
Soon? Imminent.
Yeah, I would, Madam Vice Chair, I think we can measure that in weeks, not months.
Okay. I look forward to receiving an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Figueroa, let me ask you about this GAO report that I referenced in my opening and you have referenced as well. The report identified a lot of what we knew when we were working to put together the bill. It provides for 5 recommendations on how to best remove these challenges. Apparently HHS concurred with all 5 of these, so the question is whether or not any steps have been taken so far to resolve these 5 recommendations that are highlighted in the report.
Thank you for that question, Vice Chair. The department appreciates the GL's careful examination of tribal access to the data. We've been working through the Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee to be able to identify those data needs and work with tribes to ensure that that information is available. We have the good fortune of having Councilman Victor Joseph as the chair of the STAC, and also Vice President Eileen Sylvester to provide us that unique Alaska perspective to ensure that we are incorporating those ideas and those realities into our approach to ensure that in the future tribes have the data that they need to make public health decisions.
Another question for you, and I'd ask Dr. Prescott to weigh in on this as well. There were these supporting tribal public health capacity grants that were administered through CDC for state tribal local and territorial support. CDC's approximately 70 grants were awarded to various Alaska entities. We all recognize that this pandemic has been very, very hard on American Indians, Alaska Natives. I know that many tribes across the country are searching for qualified public health staff, particularly the epidemiologists, to work on providing timely health data and recommendations. But this grant funding out there is basically one-year funding. And if what we're trying to do is build long-term capacity here, capacity building, does this really allow for that? Will this grant funding continue beyond the pandemic? What's kind of the status as you understand it? And then Dr. Prescott, if you might give some anecdotal information to this as well.
Vice Chair, thank you for that question. In terms of the grants, we moved quickly in the administration to ensure that we were building the capacity and that American Indian and Native Alaskan had the resources they needed to be able to respond. Because as you mentioned, the disparities that we saw in these communities were unacceptable. For the first year analysis shows that these funds have gone to surveillance, epidemiology, and also building up health infrastructure. The future of those funds and the future of our ability to continue to fund those programs will depend on our ability to work with Congress to continue the available funding for those programs.
Dr. Prescott?
Thank you, Vice Chair Murkowski. I am familiar with the CDC grants that you alluded to. Of the grants, I'm speaking for Lower Sioux Indian community, we have applied before. We are a smaller tribe, so it is a bit challenging. We were not successful. However, we have participated in our Tribal Epidemiology Center, who was a grant recipient, and we were a sub-awardee of that. I agree with the one-year term. It is very challenging. In Minnesota, we've had a little bit of success by having grants available for 3 years. And this is largely to see a program go through time versus 1 year, whereas oftentimes you may not know about funding for a second year and the employee is looking for another job at 9 months and then hence they move on and the program is incomplete. So I hope that helps give you a picture.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks so much to all of our panelists. I'm going to focus my questions on the Tribal Data Health Improvement Act, which, as we've been talking about, thanks so much for your partnership, Senator Murkowski. I must have Representative Young on my mind. Senator Murkowski. So we introduced this bill because of reports during the pandemic of the CDC failing to share public health data with tribal public health authorities and epidemiology centers. And the bill is pretty simple. It clarifies the CDC's responsibility to share the data, and it encourages states and federal governments to work with tribes to solve the problems of undersampling and misclassification that we've been hearing about today. I think, at its core, this is certainly a public health issue, but it's also an issue of tribal sovereignty as part of the treaty responsibilities and government-to-government relationships between the federal government and tribal nations. So we need to figure out a solution to this problem. Dr. Prescott, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Figueroa. Dr. Prescott, could you just tell us a bit about how data sharing issues during the pandemic have had an impact on your tribe's ability to respond to the crisis? And if our bill passed, how would it help?
Thank you, Senator Smith, for the question. How data sharing was limiting to us during the pandemic, primarily because there was a lag time of getting tribal-specific data. And what we found is that our Tribal Epidemiology Center was somewhat very limited because they had resources to help us put together tribal-specific public health responses, and whether it be education, policy, whatever it may be. And we had to rely on our state partners who could get the data, and we have a good relationship with our state health department, the American Indian Office, that we have there. So we were able to get that data. But the fact that we couldn't get it from the CDC, which again, if we look at government to government relations, that should have been readily available. And coming from the private sector, getting data like that was not so problematic until I came to the tribal world. So right. I hope that helps.
And so let me just understand that. So you would ask for the data and then it just wouldn't come, or they would say they couldn't provide it to you, or like what did that, just give me a little bit more detail on what that problem looked like.
Sure. We worked through our Tribal Epidemiology Center, the Great Lakes Tribal Epidemiology Center. They were not able to get the data, and then at times the data wasn't specific enough. So we're a very small tribe, 1,200 people. It was very difficult because it was oftentimes not collected, or it was we had to wait for county data to be published, and then you would assume that if it's Redwood County in Minnesota, that it was part of the American Indian Identified Group. So it was very hard to get data from CDC for us directly.
Yeah, and I mean, having visited Lower Sioux and having visited your clinic, I know what an amazing what an amazing job you do there. But not having good data makes it really difficult for you to be able to do the job that you know how to do. You can do there.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Figueroa, I'm sure we agree that data sharing with tribes is essential, and that this is both a public health matter as well as a matter of tribal sovereignty, right? Yes. Thank you. And will HHS work with us to prepare this bill for markup, and can we count on you to work with us in a timely way to get that done?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you very much. That's my Minnesota nice way of saying that I need HHS to be part of the solving of this problem, not just the explaining of it. So I appreciate that very much.
And Senator, I'll give you my New York straightforward. We have a scheduled meeting for this Friday, and we look forward to working with your team to provide that technical assistance.
I think we can work together.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you very much. I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
It's very nice of you to give us a minute back. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Welcome to the panelists. Thank you all for being here. Let me follow up on Senator Smith's conversation here, because I do want to thank Senator Smith and Senator Murkowski for their work on the Tribal Health Data Improvement Act. And thank you for the chairman for bringing this up. I do agree this bill is about sovereignty. It is about honoring our trust and treaty obligations to tribal communities, but by providing them with the same data tools that CDC already gives to states. So, Dr. Prescott and Mr. Figueroa, let me ask you this. Can you talk a little bit about the benefit that tribal epidemiology centers bring to their communities, and why it is important they have access to data like every other governmental entity? And so maybe, Mr. Figueroa, let's start with you, and then Dr. Prescott, if you would weigh in, I would appreciate it.
Thank you for that question, Senator. The department joins you in the overall objective to respect and honor tribal sovereignty, and access to good and quality data is absolutely a big part of that. It is essential for tribes to have the information they need to be able to make public health decisions, and as a priority of not only the Secretary, but also the administration. I will say to through the Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee, we bring together tribal leaders to talk about the data needs that they have, the challenges associated with getting that data, and working with them to develop solutions. We're honored to have Councilwoman Natalie Pacheco as part of that process. We will continue to work with not only the committee, but also with you to ensure that that happens on a consistent basis.
And then Dr. Prescott, without having this data, what did that mean for your community?
It meant we had to rely on those around us, which luckily our tribe does have a lot of good partners in our local public health and our state. However, it was challenging because we had resources at the tribal epicenters that essentially are apples to apples when you look at CDC and expertise and epidemiology, where we could have, in a faster approach, gotten information out to our tribe, education and resources, and identifying specific education to tribes versus, a more global approach.
And in the middle of a healthcare pandemic, I would imagine the most accurate data, most efficient, up-to-date information that you can get is going to be crucial for the tribes. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And smaller tribes like us, we don't have an epidemiologist on staff, so we do rely on our tech centers to provide that.
Thank you. Let me jump to 3789. We have some tribes in Nevada who are looking to expand their tourism economy and build off of our state's millions of annual visitors. Senator Schott's bill, S3789, would amend the Native Act to allow BIA to implement grant programs to assist in developing tourism in Native communities. So let me ask you, Mr. Newland, would this bill help BIA expand outreach and assistance for smaller tribes like mine in Nevada and help them build things like cultural centers?
Thank you, Senator. I think as I understand it, what this bill would do, it would make it this process simpler for the department to make the grant awards and distribute that, and clarify how we award grant funding under the Native Act to Native Hawaiian organizations, which in turn will make it easier for us to administer the entire program.
So let me ask you this: the authority was there. We didn't have the implementation authority, and that's what this bill does to allows you to implement the grants. How do you ensure that the tribes now are aware of these grants and are going to be applying for them?
We do our best every year, Senator, to publicize our notice of funding opportunity under the Native Act and try to encourage tribes to apply. We've seen a growth in the number of applicants, and right now we're reviewing the current year applications, and I look forward to making those awards.
Yeah, thank you. And let me just offer this, because I do think, as I talked with my tribes, and there's smaller tribes, a lot of times they don't have the resources, or the staffing to be able to be aware of the grants, let alone apply for them, which is going to be a challenge we still have to address, I believe, here in Congress. But oftentimes they are not aware. And so if there's a way that we in Congress can work with your agency to figure out how we make these tribes aware and then provide technical assistance or figure out how we help them apply for these grants, I think there's still a challenge. And quite often what I hear from my tribes is because they lack the resources or the matching dollars, they're just not going to apply for some of these grants. And we've got to do a better job.
I agree, Senator. And it's always a challenge for us to make sure that these grants are an equal opportunity for tribes across Indian country. And the folks who need the most help are probably the folks who need the grants the most. So we're always looking for ways to do better at that and open to ideas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you to all of our testifiers, to staff, to members. If there are no further questions for our witnesses, members may submit follow-up questions for the record. The hearing record will be open for 2 weeks, and I want to thank all of the witnesses for their time and their testimony today. This hearing is adjourned.